But you starting talking about Tomaszu Adamku. You know everything about professional boxing, fightings from last 60s, then 70s, 80s, 90s. You see the evolution, you see the big changes. What do you think, what's going on next? What is the next step with heavyweight division?
Well, the heavyweight division right now is kind of like what it was for the blacks in the 40s and 50s. They had no other way to turn, and that so is the situation with Eastern European guys from the Ukraine and Russia, and in your case in Poland. It's one of the sports besides soccer or football that a guy can become a professional athlete in, and it's tough. So the great athletes in the United States today, the black athletes that come from the ghetto, from the streets, they don't have to fight anymore. They can play, they get college scholarships, they can go on and play basketball, baseball, football. They have all these opportunities today that they didn't have when the United States black athletes dominated, especially the heavyweight division. We've had our exceptional white champions from time to time with Ingemar Johansson, Rocky Marciano, and very few others. Now the dominant factor is the Eastern European heavyweight. They're all controlled by the great promoters in Germany, and they're all terrific fighters. They're all dedicated athletes. They live to box. They eat to box. They do everything to box. And so consequently, they're dominating right now. I think it may be a cycle, but for the foreseeable future, the United States won't produce a big heavyweight for a while. I mean, all you need is one guy, so there's always that exception. Excuse me. Because a champion fighter is really a freak of nature. I mean, all of us that have gone out and played an afternoon a soccer match or skated in a hockey game or played a little basketball think that we can play like a professional athlete. No. Professional athletes, I've learned over the years, because I was a professional in two sports. I was professional in baseball and as a professional bull rider in the rodeos. And what I learned from the guys that I played ball with was that they're extraordinary, exceptional, gifted, talented athletes. And you mentioned Tomaszu Adamku. How can he go from a middleweight through the cruiserweight, light heavyweight division, become world champion, become cruiserweight champion, and now will fight? He's ranked 4th in the world as we sit here talking. He's got a whale of a shot, probably the best shot at David Haye, because he's tough, he's smart, he's growing, he's dedicated, he's a puncher, he can take a punch, and he's a great kid and a great athlete and a great representative of Poland. And because of the fact that he's fighting and living in the United States now, America has adopted him, and we love him as if he were our own. Because all our fighters in the early part of the last century were immigrants to the United States. If you go back to John L. Sullivan and gentleman Jim Corbett, they were all Irish guys that came in. Why? Because they were the street people of the time. They were the tough Italians, the tough Irish kids that came from the streets, and that's why you have the tough Eastern European fighters today, including Tomaszu Adamku.
Sir, thank you so much. I have another question about your connection with probably how many fighters of Polish roots you got in your life?
Well, let's think about it. Of course, Andrew Galata.
That's first,
is the first guy, and Adamku, of course, is the second guy. And I'm trying to think of the other famous Polish guys, and I just can't think of who they might be at this time. But I know that I've done a lot of Polish fighters over the years. I can't think of the big names offhand. And to be honest with you, at this stage of my career, when you're up around 900 world title fights, a lot of things just, you know, when I see Hagler, Hearns, Leonard, and all those years, they all kind of all come together. Roberto Duran, they all come together. The great years with Mike Tyson, especially the early Mike Tyson, it all comes together. The Muhammad Ali years when I broadcast the fight in Kinshasa, Zaire, the Rumble in the Jungle, the largest telecast in the history of broadcasting at the time. I was the lead announcer in that fight that went to 1 billion people live. Now, when you sit down to do a telecast and you stop and think you're going to 1 billion people around the world, it's pretty exciting. You know, I often sit down and call a championship fight, and it won't be an exception when I do Wilfredo and Vasquez and Hernandez on Saturday night. And I sit down and I say, how lucky am I? I'm doing a sport that I love, and this is for the championship of the world. And especially when it's the heavyweight championship. I often say to my viewers, I say, you know, I don't know where you are or what you do for a living, but there's nothing else I'd rather be doing at this moment in history, at this particular time, than being right where I am right now, right in the middle of the biggest sporting event of the day,
That's right.
and oftentimes of the century.